A candle never loses its light while lighting another candle. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a joy to be here in a room filled with people who understand the power of light. Rumi's words express the essence of our work in lighting, the essence of creativity, and for living fully, whether lighting a stage, a park, a person's spirit, fashion. Lighting is about sharing brightness. So let me tell you how I came to lighting. I grew up in Chicago and studied at the University of Wisconsin in the French Language and Literature department. And I took a class in contemporary French theater and fell in love with theater, French theater. Our teacher, Dr. Judith Miller, did plays, and I started working on them and was immediately drawn to the light. It was beautiful, malleable, ephemeral. It is easier to recognize life-changing moments in retrospect, but when something lights a spark, you remember. When you see the light, your own light, trust it and follow it. Do things you like. So I took a beginning lighting class with Gilbert Helmsley, who at the time was the LD at the New York City Opera, and he was teaching in Wisconsin. For our first assignment, he said, take paper, take a box of colored pencils, go out to the lake, observe the sunset, and record every color you see. So I did, and I couldn't believe it. There were so many colors in a sunset. There was even green. This was a powerful and a useful assignment. It taught me to observe versus interpret what I was seeing. It taught me observation and contemplation leading to discovery. And that's one of the things I love the most about lighting. Whenever I focus or cue lights, I love to see sort of random things that happen, sometimes accidents, and I find them delightful, and sometimes I incorporate them into my work. When I finished my studies, I thought I'd spend my life lighting theater and stage, but life is a roller coaster. It's full of unexpected turns and twists. After graduation, I interned at the National Theatre of Strasbourg, le Théâtre National de Strasbourg, then freelanced between Paris and New York. Later, I studied with the late and great lighting designer Richard Nelson at the University of Michigan Master of Fine Arts program. Richard took us, I'm sorry, I'm making a big mess on your chair here. I promised to clean it up. Richard took us to the Second Lighting Dimensions International Conference, LDI, which was in Nashville, Tennessee. I met people from all over the industry and handed out many business cards. The following week, when I was back in my studio, I received a very unexpected call from Disney recruiters, and they were looking for a lighting designer to come and work on the Paris project. I was like, whoa, okay. Having been a young freelancer, my motto was say yes to everything. So I said yes, and off I went. In life and in work, it is important to be open to unexpected opportunities. Seize them, even if it's not what you plan to do. Shifting from theater to theme park was huge, but I quickly understood that a theme park is really a gigantic theater where guests move through the story or ride through the story. The equipment is different. You have to build the theater first. There are lots and lots of codes to understand, but the design process is the same. It was my first, but spoiler alert, not my last career change. I went from lighting design to Disney, and then at Disney I went from lighting design to art directing. My first move to Disney I didn't think too much about, but afterwards I weighed my choices more carefully. And some of the things I learned were when something comes up, make a list of the things that you will like to do in the new job and what you will not like to do in the new job. And if the don't like list is longer than the like list, think twice about taking it. Consider the trade-offs: stability, growth, personal values. Money matters, but it's rarely a driver of happiness beyond a couple of weeks. Embrace your passion and accept change. Do things you like. When something is not working, try something else. You were going to do no color in a show and it looks terrible, try color. You're sick of lighting, look for other opportunities. Clarity comes later in life. When you're in the fray of it, it can feel like a mess. That's okay. So, lessons from big projects. Disneyland Paris often felt like living inside a hurricane with hundreds and hundreds of people from all different countries and disciplines working together: architects, engineers, landscapers, costume designers, special effects people, working to build a dream.
When we dream up new ideas for Disneyland, they first take shape and form in preliminary studies. The scale models and the drawings and the blueprints. These are the things that dreams are made of.
Looks exciting, right? Well, it was, sometimes. Especially living up to the Imagineering's promise, making the impossible possible. I was in charge for the first part, the Disneyland Park, of all the exteriors, lighting. So that was landscape, rockwork, facades, fountains, rivers. I was really excited about the assignment. And then I realized, hey, I've been assigned everything outside. My colleagues from California, they're inside where it's dry. So I spent a lot of time in the mud, the rain, and the snow. But it was great, and I loved the opportunity to challenge myself. I loved working with teams of really talented people from all different disciplines. To achieve the lighting to support the story, we could dream up kind of sophisticated designs and find solutions for them, even if they sometimes took some unexpected detours. Autopia was my very first attraction, and I learned many valuable lessons on Autopia. I find that the first project that you do is where you learn those lessons, even though some of them are painful. Autopia is a retro view of the excitement of the future. I had this idea of comets swirling around the load building, and this was pre-LEDs. So we developed, and I mean, you know, we've had so many good vendors, and you're really lucky when you find good vendors. This was pre-LEDs, so we designed these small xenon flash modules that we could hide inside the cornices and then whirl them around. When I brought my design to the electrical engineer, he looked at it and he almost fainted, and he said, "The inrush current is extraordinary. We're going to have to build another power station to do this." And I said, "Tomasz, we can't do that. You know that. You've got to figure something out. This is Disney. We're supposed to figure these things out." So he went away, And about a week later, with big bags under his eyes, he came back and he said, I got it, we can do this. The head electrician on the project and I had very robust discussions all through installation. In those days, we called robust discussions fights, but we can't do that anymore. We were all under a lot of pressure, and it was tough for both of us because we had different priorities. When the project was over, I was at my local market at my vegetable vendors, and I see the head electrician just standing there, and I think, oh, he's going to punch me in the face. He hates me. And instead, his face lit up, and he ran over to me, and he said, Tracy, mais je suis content. C'était le meilleur projet de ma vie. He said, I'm so happy to see you. That was the best project I've ever done. And then I understood people do not mind being pushed beyond their limits, beyond what they know, if the end result is worth it. So if you know you're right, it's worth fighting for your idea. You and the people that you work with will have something to be proud of at the end. To expand a little on innovation and technology, sometimes innovation is very sophisticated, sometimes it's very simple. It really matters, what really matters is how you're serving the story. You always start with the story, never the technology. When I was inside It's a Small World helping Dave Taylor focus his lights, I looked inside these giant turntables, and I saw that bicycle wheels were making these dolls rotate on these lovely little kiosks. So very simple innovation, very effective. Crush Coaster, in Crush Coaster, you enter the attraction through the coral reef, and it's this beautifully sculpted, black light lit piece that the guests ride through. And we were able to develop these tiny little UV black lights that we were able to hide all over in the rockwork to really accent this beautiful sculpture. And then I needed something that made it feel like underwater, so we also developed, with another one of our vendors, these giant wave lights that projected UV wave-moving black light all over the coral reef. It was really fun. Toy Story Playland was a festival of fun because the land was the size of a toy and you were the size of a toy, so the scale of everything was huge. We hid all of our lights inside these giant toys, and actually I realized that I spent much of my career hiding my lights because it's what you don't see that makes the magic. There are also small projects. This is maybe my smallest innovation project. It's the Cool Post outdoor food location in Adventureland. And this little Cool Post was the very first 100% LED project in the Disneyland Park. Sometimes you cannot incorporate the latest technology because there's often a 1 to 3 year gap between the moment that you finish your design and it goes out to bid and when you're actually in the field installing it. That's okay too, as long as you're helping to tell the story. This pictured here is the World of Disney, the flagship store in the Disney Village. And we use mostly metal halide because the ceilings were super high and there were no LED fixtures available to do that had any decent color rendering. We got a lot of criticism for it when it opened. People couldn't understand why we didn't use LEDs, but we couldn't. Once something goes out to bid, you can't change it. When you do these big projects, you get lots and lots and lots and lots of schedules. But this is the one that has always seemed the most true to me, and this is what it feels like. This is a comic rendering of a schedule by Chris Runco on the first park. This is what it feels like when you're building a new park. The excitement, the adrenaline rush of building the first Disney park in Europe, the very high intensity work that goes into building a new attraction, a new park, a fashion show, a new play, a rock concert. All of this is really intense work. And then once you're in construction on something like this, it's all crazy. You work, you're in early in the morning, you stay late at night, you work nights, you work days. The energy is so intense, you can't imagine it ever being over. You and this giant team are pulling this park out of the earth against all odds. And then suddenly, opening day comes. The ribbon is cut. The guests come in, and suddenly you go from 200 miles an hour to 0. And it suddenly hits you. Who am I? Over the years, I've learned a few things about self-preservation. Maybe some of these will resonate with you. I would take a stroll through the park, I mean, once it was built, of course, and watch guests having a good time, because it helped me to remember that this is what we were really doing, building a place where people could have fun. Sometimes when you are too tired, you need to escape the battlefield, go home and sleep, because if you're too tired, you can't get anything done. And then another thing I would say is you have to do things that aren't work. Whatever that is for you, go and do them, because you need to give your mind a break and think about other things. Creativity doesn't exist in a vacuum. Creativity is like light, invisible until it touches something real. So you have to go out into the real world and find your own way of nurturing your creativity. For me, it was observing art often and exhibitions. When we were working on the 20th anniversary, my family and I went to London, and we saw this Olafur Eliasson piece at the Turbine Hall at the Tate Modern. And the piece was so warm and so calming. It just brought all that tension down out of me at that moment. And Nikki Sanfal, I don't know if you know this artist, but she's not a light artist, but she was always a big source of inspiration to me, because I loved her joyful colors and her courage and her irreverence. And so as a woman artist, she inspired me. Exchanging ideas with peers is probably my favorite source of inspiration. There's nothing like the flow of ideas between people to light a spark. Doing research. So it takes time to do research, but it's never a waste of time, because it gives you work depth. I did a lot of this, especially in my role as the art director. So one of my last projects was turning Fuente del Oro into Casa de Coco, based on the Pixar film. We worked with Pixar, and we looked at the film, of course, for inspiration, but we also did a lot of work looking at the architecture of the period and the cultural references and the iconography to make sure that that was really meaningful. When we refreshed and rehabilitated costumes for It's a Small World, we looked carefully again into all the cultural references from each part of the world to make sure they were respectful and meaningful. So this is the opening team for Space Mountain, and that's me standing next to Joe Falzetta, who was the lighting designer and one of my mentors. I was his assistant, and Joe and I, on the first night of focusing, which is called Test and Adjust in the Disney World, we wrote the Test and Adjust blues, because we got out there to focus everything, and we asked them to bring up Circuit 1, and nothing worked. So we stood out there in the snow for hours and hours, waiting for the electricians to fix the lights. So Disney taught me humility, teamwork, and diplomacy. In a theme park, you work with hundreds of people, and many don't speak your language, either literally or figuratively. Everyone has their own priorities. The civil engineer doesn't worry about your shadows, color temperature. You're the one who cares about that stuff. But together, you and all of these other people make something people love. What helps navigating a big machine is learning to communicate ideas in the language of the person you're speaking to. Many people on a project have a very poor understanding of lighting, as many of you might know. They don't understand how it works. You can't read a light plot unless you're a lighting designer. It's not like color, which I later discovered everyone has an opinion about. So lighting taught me to bring people on board early and make them part of your creative vision. Invite them so it's their project, not your project. When we first built the park, we didn't have all the visualization tools that are available now. So to sell our lighting for a long time, we did it with words. We showed pictures, did mock-ups, and explained. That was really valuable training. In Rock and Roller Coaster, which is now Flight Force, when we changed out the moving lights from metal halide, which maintenance found had too short a life for them, we changed them to LED moving lights, and we made maintenance part of the process of selecting the fixtures. They had a lot of valuable input. They loved being part of the process, and they were fully trained when we handed the attraction over to them. So bring as many people with you as you can. I also learned a couple of tricks for maximum impact. This is the load for a crush coaster. And when we did our very first executive review, I brought everyone in the work light. We'd been looking at the under work lights for months and months and months. It all looks terrible. And when everyone was settled, wham, we cut to the show lights. And they were all like, wow, this is beautiful and so warm and colorful. And I want to tell you, never underestimate the impact of a good lighting cue. Also, put as much information on drawings and specifications as you can, because it will avoid a lot of unpleasant surprises further down the road. By learning communication and partnership, you grow professionally and personally. You become more self-confident because you understand the power of a team. You learn to forget your ego sometimes. You learn to help people out. Acts of kindness are very important. If someone's in trouble, help them. When you're in trouble, they will help you. You learn to keep swimming. This is very important. When you're struggling, everyone struggles. Keep swimming and remain professional. Focus on the work. Learn to pick your battles. You can't always win. You have to accept that. And you have to learn to just move on gracefully. In these big, beautiful teams, when you race to the finish line, powerful friendships grow. These are two of my very close friends, Beth and Sylvie, and Sylvie is right here. Came to see me, thank you. Beth couldn't come, she's suffering out on site right now. So it's all about building bridges, and this is where crossing cultures adds to the challenge and the beauty of sharing a common light. If you live in a different culture, I would say you have to try to learn the language. It will give you a greater understanding of the people, and it also shows a sign of respect, and respect is very important. The other advantage is that people will not be able to talk behind your back. Being exposed to cultural diversity and having had education and prior experience in French has been really helpful to me. But I think my curiosity started when I was a little girl and my family took the train from Chicago to New York to see the 1964 New York World's Fair. I saw Disney's It's a Small World, and I never forgot it. It was the most beautiful thing my little child eyes had ever seen. And I think it made me feel that the world was a big, beautiful place to explore, not to be feared. And I've carried that with me. I moved to France in my 20s, thinking I'd stay a year or two. That was 40 years ago. When you live for so long in a country, you become fluent in different cultures. You no longer fit in anywhere, which can be a little bit sad sometimes, but it's also quite freeing. You benefit from a very broad worldview. This openness to the world proved to be a great asset building a park that had to be the most beautiful of all the Disney parks because it was here in Europe, and in France, the country of castles. So I think it's now time to talk about our Sleeping Beauty castle. These are some images of our latest rehab that we did, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago during COVID, as you'll see, because everyone's wearing a mask. And this company actually is not too far from here. And this is a company that only did work on historic monuments and castles, never did any other projects. And they accepted to do this project. And when they did, I thought, wow, okay, we are part of the French national heritage. Our castle is. And it was a pretty cool moment. So let me just fast forward a little bit here. Gold leaf. So gold leaf is an amazing thing and nothing like it. And when I was watching the gold leafers, they apply this sort of adhesive surface, and it has to sit for just the right amount of time. And then they apply the gold leaf. And what they told me, and this is in French, and I'll translate it for you, they said, quand la surface est amoureuse, on peut appliquer la feuille. When the surface is in love, we can apply the gold. And I thought that was such a beautiful metaphor. So, so we removed, you see what bad shape they're in? I mean, they're just falling apart. So it was time to rehab them. And they were removed and rebuilt on site out here, and then craned back in, and we put them in. And fortunately, it was during COVID because we could do it in the daytime. Otherwise, we would have been doing it in the middle of the night between the parade rehearsal and the special event in that small window that's available. So over and over again, I would see a guest discover the castle and walk into the park and see it for the first time and just scream with pleasure. Being part of a place where people of all ages, types, colors, convictions, religions, ideas come together and have fun was always a great source of satisfaction for me. And I cannot speak of the castle without mentioning our dragon, who lives underneath the castle, and I spend a lot of time with this dragon. The dragon is sound asleep in its lair, and we have never decided if the dragon is a he or a she because no one dares to look. Many of you are women in lighting, and you probably, like me, have seen things change over the years. When I arrived at the National Theatre of Strasbourg for my internship, of which this actually isn't a photo, but I don't have many photos of that period because we didn't used to take pictures back then. I was the only woman on stage at the theater, and the first time I picked up a light to hang it, the entire crew stopped working and stared at me. And I felt like a circus animal, and it happened time and again. And it really took my self-confidence away. I was afraid to do anything because I was afraid of making a mistake. And then I had to rebuild it. I'm really sorry about the mess. Fortunately, there were a couple young guys on the crew that were like super nice to me, and they took me under their wing. At Disney, the challenge was combining family and career. My first son was born in 1991 in the middle of this giant construction project. And my second son was a Space Mountain baby. Not everyone on the team was supportive of me. And when I came back from maternity leave, I had the feeling that I had to make up for it and prove myself again. It was exhausting and it was difficult. Fortunately, I have a very good partner, and we shared responsibility, and everyone turned out okay, but I wouldn't go through that again, I have to say. It was too hard. When we built the second park, the Walt Disney Studio Park, it was very different. Our project lead, Paula Dinkle, who's the blonde on the right there, my right, she was a single mother, and Laura Yates and I in the picture were the other two leads on the project. And she said, we're all mothers, and if someone has a sick child, they stay home and we will cover for her. And it really worked, and it was so much easier knowing that we were a team and we would help each other out. And I think at our own level, it's a really good example of how we can change mindsets and help make better work-life balance. and our team did a great job, and everybody loved us. In 2011, I needed a change and had the opportunity to transition to art director of the Disneyland Park. I became the guardian of the aesthetics of a park open 365 days. So very different from being on a project-driven schedule. And I learned it's not about opening day. Opening day is just the beginning. Instead of one big project, you and the team do hundreds of small and medium ones, and they're all important. For example, we added, so this one is when we built on a new addition to Bella Notte Pizzeria and brought in the Luca, the Pixar film Luca theme, and we did a giant rehab of Buzz Lightyear exterior lighting, including these incredible crackle neon light towers. This was a cable car bake shop. We had a new partner, new sponsor, so we invented a new story to fold that into the shop. And this one was a lovely project. We designed wheelchairs for some of the dolls so that all children who rode could identify with the dolls in the attraction. We partnered with lots of different departments and different vendors. And this one was really a lovely project. This was a wedding carriage that we did for Disney weddings. And we partnered with Swarovski, the crystal makers. And they provided tons and tons of crystals. So the exterior of this carriage is covered in Swarovski crystal. And it definitely looks like a happily ever after picture, I think. When you make a career switch, at the beginning, there can be a gap between your expectations and reality. It took me a while to adjust to the fact that other people on the team were the experts. I was not doing the design myself anymore. I had to let go and trust because my role was keeping the creative vision of the park alive. And I had the honor of doing that with an incredible team of experts, and some of them are here in the audience. If you guys could just wave. I mean, these are fantastic people. I would totally recommend going and talking to them when you can, because they have lots of interesting things to say. So I think as a leader, you have to keep the excitement alive, maintain high standards, keep your sense of humor, and take time to listen to what people on your team have to say to you. You take on the team's wins, but also the failures, and never throw anyone under the bus. You accomplish nothing alone. And you have to understand when it's time to leave. I'd been thinking about it for a while and was becoming way too crabby in my day-to-day job. So I realized my next change, what I really wanted was retirement. It's a huge shift going from that kind of work environment to retirement, but it does open up a lot of opportunity, and it allows you to slow down, which was a wonderful thing. And you also make room for younger people to grow. I went back to lighting and did a show. It was my very first show with moving lights, thanks to Ayrton, who helped me out with some really nice equipment. I had a great time. And I do mentoring, teaching, sharing, lots of yoga, lighting other candles. If I've learned anything, it's this: your light doesn't give it away. It doesn't fade when you give it away. It multiplies. So let's keep lighting the world.
Thank you, Tracy. Great way to end with the candles blown out as well. Would you like to join me on the morning TV sofa, and we'll do a few questions? So I'm looking expectantly at the audience. Who's got a question? Have we got a microphone?
I'm just really curious about how often you refurb something at Disney. So obviously there's elements of the park that have been there since it opened. How often do those things get taken out and replaced? How do you go through the process of things like upgrading your lighting to LED from old sources? what are the considerations in that process?
Well, I'd say there's no set rule, and it depends. You know, we went through an initial phase that was kind of tricky because there were some financial difficulties, and we didn't actually rehab as much as we would have liked to. But really, you know, if you paint outside has to be repainted every few years. You know, it just doesn't hold up under UV. So that has to be sort of a regular cycle, hopefully. But other things inside the attractions, sometimes there's obsolescence, so you have to replace a system because it's obsolete. Sometimes things are replaced because there are upgrades because there's something better, like, you know, in Pirates, we made when we introduced Jack Sparrow from the film, we also introduced electronic heads, which is like a big innovation in the Disney world. So sometimes it's about opportunity. So there's no set rule. There's regular maintenance. There's a team that goes in every day and does things. Well, not every day. You would like that, but it doesn't happen that way. But, you know, the costumers, for example, in Pirates, It's a Small World, Pirates of the Caribbean, they're in there practically every day because, you know, there's humidity, things, you know, hair falls in the captain's face, and you can't have that. So it really is a constant. There's the routine maintenance, and then there are the times when the attractions are shut down, and for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 months, depending on what you do, whether you are doing a really major rehab or a smaller scale one. Did that answer your question?
Is there a favorite project that you have from all of the ones you've done over the years at Disney?
Well, you know, I think it's kind of funny because the first park was amazing. We had really, really generous budgets. And, you know, you could really kind of think things up and propose them, and they would say yes. The second park, though, was very different, and it was a different economic environment. And we had much more modest budgets, and it was kind of, you know, it was a bit of a shock, and I thought, how can we do something as good as what we did before in this economic environment? But at the end of the day, we did, and I mean, it's, you know, it wasn't like the first park. We've been going back over the years, enhancing it and enhancing it and enhancing it, but I had the best time working on that. You know, it's funny how sometimes some of it's not the biggest, fanciest projects that are always the most fun. So sometimes there's the work satisfaction, and then there's the fun part. Yeah. And those can often be different. You know, they don't always align. Yeah. So I did have a good time in the second park. And then I did love doing Toy Story Playland, I have to say. The Pixar world is really attractive.
Is there a film that you didn't get to do a ride for, or a theme for, that you would have loved to have done? Well, actually, that's a good question, because there was one project that I was supposed to get, and had been promised to me, but I work in a very big company, and so things sometimes change at the last minute, and it was a very, very big disappointment. But in the end, you know, it ended up kind of sparking something new, and that's when I looked around for a new opportunity, and I fell upon, you know, I was offered art directing. Yeah. And so it all worked out. Okay. Do you want to tell us what that one project was, or are you keeping... I'll tell you later. Okay, that's good. Because I love the guy who did it, you know. Yeah, absolutely. You know, no hard feelings, but... And it started you down a new route as well. And it started me down a new route. Yeah, so that's good. Yeah. Any more questions? Yep. Microphone over there. Try now.
Hello. Oh. Were you ever involved in lighting the parades at Disneyland? And did you enjoy that? And what was that experience like?
So no, I never designed the parades. At Disney, so I worked in a division called Imagineering, and there's the side of us that do the attractions, the restaurants, the shops, the exteriors, everything that's not on stage. And then we have an entertainment division that just does what's on stage with live performers, so the parades and the stage shows. So actually the team, I mean, Stefano's here, he knows this because he's an architect. What we did a lot of was hiding the gear that entertainment put out there, because they come out with flamethrowers and giant projection machines that they plant on the roof of Main Street, USA, which is Victorian. And it's like, could you hide this? And you say, okay. And, you know, we did a lot of that, but we collaborated. I mean, we did collaborate with, it's an interesting partnership. Sometimes it's quite fraught with conflict. Other times it goes smoothly, you never know. But we collaborated a lot because we really wanted what was going in entertainment-wise to fit in. You know, if there was a piece of scenery that was going to stay on the stage all the time, we would work very hard with them to make sure it looked right all the time, because we found that the entertainment people were very focused on that 10-minute show, whereas, you know, 10 hours of the day, there was no show. And you don't want to have something for what is most of the day that doesn't fit in with the theme. And it's hard, you know, what they do is so intense and so, you know, difficult that they sometimes would forget. So we worked a lot with them trying to corral things and keep everything looking good.
Thank you.
Another question in the middle there.
You spoke a little bit about work-life balance in the early stages of your career. Do you think it's gotten any better since when you first started?
Yeah.
And when on working in the park, you said 365 days. What were your working hours like? Was it more like you had to go in in the evenings, or were you more daytime, seeing what the jobs were for the evening crew?
Yes, all of that. That was what was kind of hard about it. So it was, things have gotten a lot better, and I realized that when I became the lead for the lighting team at Imagineering on the projects, my assistant, Pascal, who's a man, would say, my kids were older by then, they were, you know, raging teenagers, and I couldn't wait to get out of the house, and they couldn't wait to get rid of me. And Pascal would say to me, you know, because you have these meetings with California, and California wakes up and goes into work at 5 o'clock in the afternoon your time. And, you know, remote work was not a thing when I started out. We didn't do that. It wasn't available. But Pascal, he would say to me, I'm really sorry, I can't stay for this call at 6 o'clock tonight because I have to pick my daughter up from school. And I was like, Pascal, I'm here. You go pick your daughter up. And I thought, oh, okay, I can see that there's really been a shift. But it was hard the first time. I mean, it was really, you know, a lot of the guys who came and were relocated, their wives who came with them weren't working, and so they were carrying the load at home, and that's not the way my life was. And the first part was really hard because it was a very intense project, and it was very big and very ambitious and very fast. And so I was working some of the time 6 or 7 days a week, and I didn't see my baby a lot, and I felt bad about it. I had a lot of mother guilt. And I don't think he was so happy about it either. So it was tough. It was tough. And I don't know if I think maybe now I might have had an option to do it a little differently. I don't know. I wouldn't wish that on anybody, actually. It was really kind of too tough. But we're all still alive.
Okay, and any other questions? No? One last one from me. You said at the start, like Disney, it was one huge stage set. So it's basically like, and you had your theatre knowledge and you were coming in, but it sort of felt like to me that you must have had to adapt that to an architectural world in terms of this. Was that difficult? How did you sort of make
Yeah,
that leap
yeah.
into a different world of light fittings?
Well, yeah, there was a learning curve. There was a learning curve because I don't know, someone said earlier, I remember the first time my lights were poured in concrete. I was like, I am so hosed here. If this is not right, you know, it's concrete. You just can't go out and break it and move them over 5 centimeters. And so there was someone on the team at the time, Mécanique, who was one of the few women working in lighting in France at that time, in architectural lighting. She was working for Philips Lighting. And she was so kind, and she would come over, and I would say, Mécanique, could you help me make sure that I have the spacing right and the photometrics are right? And we went over it time and time and again, and they were perfect. They were perfect. But, you know, then I got used to concrete and, you know, those things, and I became a lot more comfortable with it. And then I kind of liked it because, you know, once you put it down, you were done.
Yeah.
You were done, and you didn't have to think about it again. But the other thing I think was a mind shift for me. You know, in the theater, you do think, well, if it's not quite right, I'll move the light, or we can sort of shift it, you know, futz it with it, and we'll fix it on. I mean, that's not all that true, because you have limitations, but you do have that reassuring idea in your head. And it's not like that, you know, you don't have as much wiggle room, and you really, really have to make that leap into that world and give that up and go with it. And I realize that the installation, you know, when you do a show, it's pretty quick.
Yeah.
From the time you design it to the time you're queuing.
Yeah.
Whereas in construction, it can be weeks and months, and you know, it's dragging out and everything's late. And so you have a lot of time to fret, you know, and think, gosh, maybe I shouldn't have put that, you know, was that really the right, you know, or maybe I could ask them to done. And what I learned is never do that, because in fact, even though you don't remember all of the process that you went through, when you're in the design phase, it's very intense, you're very focused, and you have all sorts of things in your mind. Yeah. And the decisions that you make then, you make for a reason. And so I learned, you know, don't fix mistakes before they happen. And wait, because generally the mistakes that actually you have made, you haven't even thought about. And so you're going to have to fix something that you never even imagined.
That's a fantastic piece of advice. In fact, when I was thinking of what questions can I ask Tracy, I was going to ask you what advice would you give to people starting out. But your whole presentation was literally a series of advice steps and brilliant life advice and design advice. So thank you for that. I hope you'll think of writing it down into a book, because there was so much knowledge and experience there that was so worth sharing. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Tracy.
Thank you.